apprenticeship is basically a contract between a young person, not necessarily a young person, but usually a young person, the company that has hired that person and the government to ensure that a proper training programme is undertaken to make sure the person ends up at the end of the term of the apprenticeship having all the skills required to move forward with their life in that trade. In the case of the stonemasonry trade, the apprenticeship in Ontario lasts about 6,000 hours between time on the site and time in classroom, learning the basic skills, basic, intermediate and then advanced skills in the classroom, and a total of 6,000 hours, as I said, usually done over 3 years or maybe 4, depending on how much work gets done in that particular time span. Sometimes the seasons can be short because of weather. The apprenticeship programme probably really took off here after the First World War in Canada. But generally in other areas there was concrete and brick coming in, there wasn't so much stone, and the stonemasonry apprenticeships kind of died off during the period between the wars and then after, because people were looking for cheaper things to build with. Stone wasn't very cheap and isn't very cheap to build with. But in the case of the stonemasons, probably one of the oldest trades in the world, an apprenticeship has probably been around in our trade in some form since the days of the pyramids. And it really took shape in Europe in the great big building boom in the medieval times in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries. That was the time when there was all these churches and castles getting built. And the master mason would be in charge of building these huge edifices, and he would take apprentices under his wing to train them how to do the work. Why? Because there wasn't very many masons around at that point. And the guilds were there to protect the members of the guild from getting mistreated by the owners. The owners of these castles were quite often pretty violent human beings, especially in these early days. And if they decided that the stonemason wasn't going to get paid, then they just literally didn't pay the stonemason. And if the stonemason kicked up too much of a stink, sometimes the stonemason just disappeared. But the guilds were set up to avoid that kind of thing. A bunch of people coming together to make sure that they weren't mistreated. And these were in fact the early unions. But the apprenticeship is a wonderful thing, and here we're trying to bring it back into its own. We're desperately short of young tradespeople in all of the trades in Canada. We have a huge skill set missing, a whole generation of people missing. Most of the people that are in the trades at the moment are in their late 40s or early 50s. This is the average age, and that's an incredibly bad thing for the future of Canada. We can only sort it in two ways. We can either bring people in from other countries, or we can train them here. And it's my personal belief that training them here is the best way to do it. We have approximately 20 apprentices at the moment on the crew, and they're all doing very, very well at various stages of their apprenticeship, and they will go through the schooling as we all did. Slightly later here, I said that you don't necessarily have to be young in Canada, and that's true. We have people coming into the trade after maybe spending 10 years in finance or 10 years doing completely different things altogether. Music, for instance. A lot of musicians in our crew. And that's all right, that's not a bad thing, but in my case I started my apprenticeship on my 16th birthday, and in my days the apprenticeship was 4 years. It was a longer apprenticeship. And so why 16? Well, in Scotland at the time you had finished your grade 12 equivalent by the time you were 16, and that was when you usually went out into the world and either went to university or went into the trades, and I chose the trades, and I'm very happy I did.
Kevin Tovey. I'm 26 years old. I'm originally from Huntsville, Ontario. I moved to Ottawa 7 years ago to go to Carleton University, and I took criminology with a concentration in law there, and I graduated, and I was originally planning on going into the RCMP, so I took a security job up on Parliament Hill, and that allowed me to do my schoolwork and also kind of gain the experience that I needed for that. But along the way, I ran into a bunch of guys that were doing masonry on the West Block, and I was kind of sick of the security job when school was over, so for a summer job I decided to kind of go on with them as a laborer, and 2 years later I'm into my apprenticeship and still working on West Block, and I love every minute of it.
A lot of the stuff that goes on with the apprenticeship system, I think, was sort of driven by this immigrant feeling that everybody had to do better than the generation before. And I think when the masons and plumbers and roofers came over from Europe to come to Canada, they wanted their kids to be something better, and probably influenced them to go towards the university or college route where they could become accountants and lawyers and doctors. the real truth, though, is that some of my masons are going to turn up, and when they get to journeyman status and they're up at the top end of the scale, they'll be making as much as some lawyers and doctors and accountants, and doing very, very well for themselves. But there is a whole other softer side to this. The conservation side is very, 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 very rewarding. The whole job is rewarding. I don't know of any other trade on the planet, including bricklayer, that is as rewarding as being a stonemason. Nobody covers up our work. People want to touch our work. People write songs and poems about our work. People paint things that we've built. You don't see that very much when you're talking about a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter even, although some log cabins around this particular neck of the woods where we are just now are just stunning. They will disappear in a relatively short period of time, whereas a stone building will last for centuries. And this image of being able to go up and touch something that has been created so long ago is pretty cool, and it lives through us. We feel this all the time. John Ruskin said one time that when we build, let us think that we build forever. Let us build in the knowledge that there's a time to come when these stones will be held sacred because our hands have touched them. That's a wonderful way to think about what you do on a daily basis. It's a wonderful thing to be able to say to a young person. We've got one in the crew just now, a kid called Danny Grover. He's only 20 years old. He's just about finishing his apprenticeship. Next year he'll finish his apprenticeship. And Danny has this great attitude towards the whole thing. And I tell him every day nearly, you're a lucky man, Danny, because you're going to come by and show your grandkids what you've built. You're working on this building. It's a beautiful building to work on. It's part of our Parliament buildings. You're going to be able to bring your grandkids up here in 50 years or so and point to all the things that you've done. And he loves it. And it gives him a spring in his step. And that's the way it should be. Kevin Tovey's another one of our really interesting young guys. He was working as a security guard when we first bumped into him. He wanted to be a policeman and had gone and done the police sciences course at college and passed. And he was just sitting there waiting on somebody to phone him up and say, okay, you can come and join us. And he took a job as a security guard on Parliament Hill. And after a few weeks of watching guys coming back and forward with smiles on their faces and joking and laughing, both going into work and coming out of work, he thought maybe I'd like a slice of that. And he asked, and we gave him a job. He started as a labourer, and now he's involved in our apprenticeship system, which is what we like to do. Everybody has to start at the very bottom end. First thing you need to learn is how to mix cement. Mortar. Our mortar is very, 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 very touchy, very, very intricate in its mixes. And so Kevin learned to do that, and with his whole attitude and his whole demeanour, just we pinpointed him almost right away as somebody who wanted to be, or who we wanted to come into the masonry crew and become an apprentice. And he's doing very, very well.
For an 8-week period, I'm at the OMTC downtown Ottawa, and we do in-class training, and as well we're in the shop for about 6 hours a day learning to lay brick and block and kind of the fundamentals of masonry. I enjoy doing stuff with my hands. I mean, after being in school, it was kind of a lot of sitting around, a lot of reading, so it was nice to kind of get out and do something with my hands. And with masonry, it's really rewarding seeing the work that you do at the end of the day. Yeah, I'm done school actually tomorrow, so everyone's kind of itching to get back to work and get back on the project. We're going through as a class, and there's 5 of my co-workers who are in that class with me, so we're all kind of going through the same thing, and you know, we all enjoyed it and we all learned quite a bit from that program. I can't see it being a lot different. I mean, there are various stages outside of work that I'm going to be going through. I'm getting married in a year and a half, but I mean, work-wise, hopefully I'm a little bit higher in the totem pole by that point, but you know, basically doing the same work and kind of enjoying every day of it. Yeah, it's actually a trade that has so many different doors it opens. I mean, for right now, I just kind of want to get in and learn a bit about everything. I have been kind of learning how to square stones by hand chiseling, and I really enjoyed that. You give it the nice antique face. But I mean, for right now, it's just kind of taking everything as I go. I really have learned a lot about planning ahead, because you can't kind of just willy-nilly build things. I mean, there's a lot of planning and a lot of steps to get to the end result. So I think a lot of planning, and you kind of got to make sure you know where you want to be.